Once again, this is Brainstorms. I'm Jack Jersawitz. Let me start out by telling you the phone number here is 873-1349. You guys can call in anytime you want, and we'll talk about almost anything you want to talk about. Of course, you all know that my subject is politics, international affairs, Georgia State University, City of Atlanta, and ultimately public access. So let me start with what I think is important, because as I understand it at the moment, despite a motion passed by the executive board of People TV, that terrible bunch of, well, I won't call them names tonight. I can't think of enough names to call them. This place was once, I should tell you, this operation that is public access television was once run in a very reasonable manner by a company that didn't want anything else to do with it except run it and keep it out of its hair. And of course, that was the cable company. It started many years ago, better than 20 years ago, probably about 30 years ago, as 5 specific studios in 5 different neighborhoods of Atlanta. There was a studio out on MLK, out near the it's the YMWCA, I believe. There was another studio in by that one-time modernist building off, what is that, the Lakewood Expressway going west. There was a studio in near Georgia, on Georgia Avenue. There was a studio in in Little Five Points. And there was a studio in the main cable company office building over here on 14th Street. So there were 5 studios. We could only go live at that time from the one studio in 14th Street. I was first introduced to public access television at the studio in Little Five Points. I remember walking in there one day and looking at what was on the tube, and I saw what was on the tube somewhere, and I said, "Oh, that's garbage," walked away from it. And then one evening, sitting in there was a bar in Little Five Points. The pub was what it was called. Sitting in the pub, drinking and talking to somebody, and running my mouth about probably the mayor of the time, whoever it was, I don't remember. Running my mouth about that, and this guy down the other end of the bar, who turned out to be a guy named Norbert Bain, a very wonderful guy, who, sitting there talking to a girlfriend of his, looked over and said, "You know, we ought to put him on TV." And he talked me into going into the studios and learning how to do what you have seen me all these years do, produce television, and of course my own brand of talk TV, call and talk television. And I learned that from, I was introduced to that from Norbert Bain, who was a great producer and a great manager. He knew what the hell he was doing. And he knew how to involve community in the operation. And because the cable company only provided a manager and an assistant manager for each of those 5 studios, get that, that's 10 people. And they had 2 additional people in the main office to take care of the overall business end of it. They had 12 people running 5 studios, a much smaller number than People TV has running this operation, which is 2 studios in 1 building. But I got introduced to television then. It wasn't People TV then. It was the Atlantic Cable Company, or whatever they called that operation, and started doing these shows, and we're now many years down the line. At one point, that the cable company wanted to get rid of it, and worked out a deal with the city where the city would set up what you now have, this monstrosity and the monster board, People TV, who think that this is their little play toy to do with as they please. And all of these years, we have been at war over the fact that this is a created First Amendment forum. That language is very specific. This is not a traditional First Amendment forum. That is not the thing you do out on the street corner when you get up on a little platform and speak to people. It's not the any of these traditional places where one speaks. Sometimes you find parks that are traditional places, like Union Square in New York, or what's the place in London? I'm trying to remember. Just went out of my head. Old heads are slow to pull some of these things out sometimes. Oh, Hyde Park in London, which is a very traditional space for speech, not under the U.S. Constitution, but under the old British common law. And other places in this country, there's a place in Berkeley that has a traditional place for speech. But this is a created First Amendment forum because the city of Atlanta set up this operation in concord with the cable company to provide access to television for folks like you, or noisy, loudmouth folks like me, or religious folks or anybody else. And if you watch this regularly, you know there's all kinds of stuff on here. Unfortunately, when they converted it to a nonprofit, and I fought like hell because I knew this would happen, the nonprofit board seemed to think they're a bunch of smart assholes that know more about about public access TV than we do. And they run it like a little dictatorship. And they are the most outrageous people I have ever seen. Well, we had thought, and I'm working up to the fact, for those of you who know, this is the off season. And we have had a years-long battle here with one manager or another playing games, deciding, yeah, you live shows can run through, no, you live shows can't run through, between seasons, that is. And we've had one hell of a long battle. It's been going on for years. And some months ago, the manager here, who seemed to be a different face, and we're talking now about Allison Fussell, seemed to be a different face and a different style, went before the board and had them pass a motion enabling her to let people who are live programmers come here as I am right now and program in the interseason between the regular seasons, between the hours of 6 and 8, and since this is 6 o'clock, that covered me. And I will tell you now, I objected at the time. I didn't think it ought to be time specific. I didn't think it was appropriate for People TV's board or management to grab a quarter of the programming year to do with as they pleased. But they did pass a motion that enabled me between 6 and 8, or any other producer who wanted to produce between 6 and 8 in the off season, to come in here and produce. I made application as was directed for the 4 interseason, that is between seasons, programs, and then was informed a couple of weeks ago that I wasn't going to get all of them. That this was going to be my last one until the new season began, which means if you see a tape here next week, it's because the goons up front, not the staff here, I want to be careful about that, not the staff, but the goons up in the main office, Allison Fussell, the goons and the board, see fit to make this a matter of charity. A matter of charity instead of a First Amendment right. And that's what I'm sitting here bitching about. I think that every one of you that appreciates what a First Amendment forum is, and if you don't understand what a First Amendment forum is, or what a created forum is, telephone number's right there, call in and we'll talk about it. I think that every one of you that appreciates what a First Amendment forum is, and that appreciates that some of us can get up here and talk about things in a manner that you won't find on commercial TV, ought to call in the main office. 873-6712 is the main office number. 873-6712. If you don't remember it or haven't written it down, you can always look it up in the phone book. Call in and tell them what a bunch of bastards they are, stealing channel time from a First Amendment forum. And I don't suggest you mince any words at all. I think people that do that are the people that ought to be put to the chair. You see, I'm not opposed to the death penalty, for instance. I'm opposed to the people they use it on, the poor guys, the poor people out there who are battered, who are mistreated, who are done all kinds of things to all their lives, and who get stuck into that kind of syndrome. I don't think it ought to be used on them. I think it ought to be used on public officials and their appointees like this board, who violate our rights, who imprison people unfairly, who do the things that this government does. That's where I'd use the death penalty, and I'd have no hesitance to use the death penalty on members of a board that take away from the public's right, and that's not just me. It's me who sit here and bitch about it. Others here won't bitch about it on TV. They're still too worried about losing their show. They're too worried about what happening to them, what happened to me here 3-4 years ago when they had me arrested for doing exactly what I'm doing now, or trying to stop me from doing exactly what I'm doing now. They're too scared, so they won't sit here and bitch as I will. But I think that folks that do that, folks that violate our rights, folks that take away our First Amendment right to speak, ought to be taken out and put to the electric chair. I wouldn't even be nice with needles. I'd do it the nice, hard, painful way. Because those people are mad dogs. They don't look as mad as the one in the White House, but they're not far, believe me. They make it possible for the mad dog in the White House to get away with the stuff he gets away with. Or there'd be more voices out here saying these things. I can tell you this. This operation, and I'm not talking about the staff. I have heard complaint after complaint from people who want to produce here and who come here and are just put through too many hassles to bother to put their time into doing it. So if I'm not here next week, if you've got you got a tape on here instead of me live, pick up that phone, or pick up the phone tomorrow or now, or preferably during business hours, and ask for Allison Fussell and tell her what a goon she is and how she better put me back on. And I don't mind using language like that. Of course, I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about all of you getting in here and protesting and raising hell. So we'll leave it at that for the moment. She pretended. She said she was a nice person. She could talk to you. She actually went before the board with a motion. And then in the long run, she couldn't resist. She has to control. And so I get 3 out of these 4 of these shows. Some of you out there, some folks might say I ought to be grateful. I've heard people say we ought to be grateful for this channel. We ought to be grateful that it's given to us. And I say grateful hell, it's our right. They give away most of the television spectrum to commercial operations, although theoretically in law, it's the property of the people of the United States. And so once somebody, I'll tell you who, James Bond, when he was on city council, pushed for this and got it, and he deserves credit for that. Let me go to the phone. Good evening, you're on Brainstorms.
Yeah, I was wondering if you would want to smoke a bowl with me tonight.
Might what? Oh, must be one of my GSU friends. Anyway, you know, James Bond, when he was a city councilman, and I don't necessarily agree with James Bond on lots of things, when the cable operations were first beginning, when they were first wiring the city, insisted that the contracts had to provide for what, as I say before, was 5 studios in 5 different locations and 2 channels, and we're down now to 2 studios in 1 channel, in one place and 1 channel. Good evening, you're on Brainstorms.
Yeah, I was wondering how much pot you smoke.
Well, you know something? I've done a little bit of that in the past as an experiment, and it has no effect.
Well, the reason I asked that is you're fucking wacko.
You think so? I mean, I wish I had a way to turn his number around and let everybody out there know so you can all call him and tell him what a wacko he is. You know, wacko's a matter of taste sometimes. That's the way it goes. So that's the story about People TV. You know, we can't give up on this operation. We can't let them do the things they want. Allison wants to make it a matter of privilege, a matter of charity, that she deigns to give us these program slots. And I say the First Amendment insists she give us these program slots, and we're going to do something about it. As a matter of fact, let me tell you about one of the things that this fine manager does while she's playing these games. This fine manager, you know, this is the channel time here is worth something. It doesn't cost us, but it's worth something. It's limited. And this organization tells producers usually that they can only get a half hour of program time because there isn't enough time. But along comes Allison Fussell, the manager of this joint, and rips off a whole 2-hour slot for her special programming. And you know, That says it all. That tells you all you need to know about Alison Fussell. And I wouldn't have blown that here, except that Alison wants to play games, so we'll play games. Let's leave it at that. Enough of my spleen and People TV. Let's talk about things going on in the world. Today is May Day, and those of you who know what May Day is. Those of you who don't know what May Day is are about to find out. Let me read you an editorial from the Newsline, a newspaper, a daily newspaper in England, published by the Workers' Revolutionary Party, which is a section of the International Committee for the Fourth International, the World Party of Socialist Revolution. Let me read you their editorial on May Day. And perhaps, if you really consider in conjunction, as they do here, all the things that are going on in the world, you will see that there is a revolution underway. It's the May Day editorial statement of the Workers' Revolutionary Party in Newsline. Workers organize for world revolution. On May Day 2002, the Newsline editorial board sends its revolutionary greetings to the workers and poor of the world, who in every country and in every continent are resisting fiercely the attempts of imperialism to reorder the world. We send our greetings in particular. Well, let me pick up the phone. Good evening, you're on Brainstorms. That's our local assholes. We send our greetings in particular to the heroic Palestinian people and their steadfast leadership around President Yasser Arafat. They are on the front line of the struggle against the US and UK-supported Israel and its military machine, the most powerful in the Middle East. We send our greetings to the Palestinian youth and workers who in Jenin, Nablus, Ramallah, Hebron, and Bethlehem have given a glorious example of how to fight against imperialism and its Zionist gangsters. We send our greetings to the thousands of Palestinians being held prisoner in Israeli camps and jails, including the Fatah leader Marwan al-Barghouti, and demand that all of the prisoners be freed at once. Your struggle is not in vain. It has succeeded in not only exposing the murderous nature of imperialism and Zionism to the peoples of the world, it has begun to move the working class of the world into action through its trade unions to boycott Israel and act against those governments that are supplying Israel militarily, such as the British government. With the support of the working class of the world, the Palestinian state will be established, and Zionism and imperialism will be defeated in the Middle East. We send our greetings as well to the Iraqi people who, even in their celebrations of Saddam Hussein's birthday, showed their defiance of imperialism. It is to the credit of the Iraqi government and people that while the Arab kings and presidents have just watched the Palestinians being slaughtered, Iraq has given its support to the maximum. There is no doubt that an Anglo-US attack on Iraq will be resisted by the entire Iraqi and Arab peoples and will also be resisted by the workers of the world. We demand that the British trade unions tell Blair, that is the Prime Minister of England, the British trade unions tell Blair to his face that any Anglo-US attack on Iraq will be met with industrial action by the trade unions to stop the war and bring down his government. And for myself and our organization here, I say we demand the same thing of the American trade unions, that they oppose as well and demonstrate as well and strike as well against any attack on Iraq. We send our greetings to the workers and youth of Argentina. They have seen the worldwide share collapse, the collapse of gigantic industries in the US, in Europe, and Japan, and the growing slump and trade war result in the meltdown of the Argentinian economy. The Argentinian bourgeoisie owes $140 billion to the world's banks. The IMF and the World Bank is demanding that the debt is paid through a massive austerity program being imposed on the Argentinian masses. The banks are closed, the industries are closed, and now the IMF wants to see mass starvation in Argentina. Argentina is an advanced country, and its crisis is part of the world crisis of capitalism. It is showing the rest of the capitalist world, that includes us, here in the US, it is showing the rest of the capitalist world its future. The Argentinian workers have no alternative this May Day but to move forward to bring down the Peronist regime and impose a workers' government. This will nationalize the banks, the major industries, and the land, and carry forward a socialist revolution that will spread throughout Central and Southern America. Meanwhile, in Europe, France shows how close the worldwide economic crisis has brought the great metropolitan capitalist countries to civil war. 16% of French voters in the first round of the presidential election voted for left parties and refused to vote for Jospin. Millions voted for parties that called for a socialist revolution and supported world revolution. French society is polarized, with the forces of the left and the right mobilizing for battle. You think the French Revolution back in the 18th century was a revolution? You haven't seen anything yet. The French workers will support Chirac in the second round of the election, to use the memorable Leninist phrase, like a rope supports a hanging man. And having seen off Le Pen, and that is the fascist, will then mobilize behind new leaders to deal with Chirac and the Fifth Republic to go towards socialism, forward to socialism. These struggles that have erupted in different parts of the world, whether they are led by revolutionary nationalists or by the working class, are, in fact, united with one another. They are all a product of the massive crisis of the capitalist system, its slump, trade war, and its pauperization of the masses, and the drive that has emerged out of it, led by U.S. imperialism and its British running dog, to reorder the world and reimpose the power of imperialism on every part of it and on every section of the working class and the poor. The economic catastrophe and the imperialist onslaught is driving forward the world socialist revolution. For the Palestinian state to be established and for the Iraqi people to stay free from imperialist domination, imperialism and Zionism must be smashed, not just in the Middle East, but in the great metropolitan capitalist states as well. Again, that's here in the United States. The workers of the U.S., where millions have been sacked or seen their lives destroyed by the Enron and other collapses, the workers of Japan, and the workers of Britain facing a Blair government determined to privatize the entire public sector, the workers of Italy facing Blair's political friend Berlusconi and his MSI fascist allies, and the workers of France, all are now in the same trench as the former colonial peoples resisting re-enslavement and the workers of Russia and China resisting capitalist restoration. The world is driving toward world revolution and demands the development of a worldwide revolutionary leadership to smash capitalism and imperialism. This leadership is the Fourth International, and that's our organization internationally. Only the Trotskyist movement grasps the nature of this historical crisis of the capitalist system. Only parties that act on the basis of this historical crisis, which is the death agony of capitalism, can give the required leadership to the working class and the masses of the world to resolve this crisis through the victory of the world's socialist revolution. And there's an appeal here to join the British section of the WRP. If you are interested in a section here in the United States, you can always call me. Number is 404-892-1238. 404-892-1238 is my personal number. Once again, 404-892-1238. And it's a further appeal to build sections of the International Committee throughout the world. It ends, mobilize the youth and workers for the socialist revolution, make 2002 the year for the victory of the Palestinian people and the year for smashing imperialism worldwide and for going forward to socialism. Now, they spoke of France, and I should have here, let's see. Yes, indeed. There it is, one, and that's May 1st. Let's see what else we have. Because this is later than the newspaper in front of me, having come off the net only a short while ago. There's another item, and that's that's about the same time. Two items. One is Reuters and one is Associated Press. I pulled out for your amusement an article from Reuters, which is London Reuters. Queen starts tour determined to stay in the job. I've just read the statement of the Workers' Revolutionary Party, the May Day editorial statement in England. And as an interesting contrast, Queen starts tour determined to stay in job. And it's a recitation of how this old feudal monarch, Queen Elizabeth of England, celebrating 50 years on the throne, began a grueling, well, she doesn't have to do it, does she? Began a grueling golden jubilee tour of her kingdom on Wednesday, having scotched speculation that she may step aside for her "I will inject idiot" son. I can't help it. Everybody knows that those folks are so inbred they have problems. The steely 76-year-old monarch used a rare appearance in Parliament on Tuesday to declare her resolve to continue, an expression of the huge contradictions in this world, where you have a whole peoples all over the world in revolt. And anybody that looks and puts all this stuff together, as our statement did, knows that there is a struggle going on all over the world to put an end to monstrosities like this ancient queen, or that even more ancient monster they've resurrected in Afghanistan, and some of the others that still exist around the world. But the French have an idea what to do about these things, and they are in the process. So if you're sitting there saying, oh, that's all that red bullshit, that red rhetoric, that nonsense about world revolution and so on and so forth, let me tell you what is actually going on. And if you have a computer, and many of you do these days, you ought to very seriously go looking. Number here again is 404-873-1349. This is Reuters, Paris, 2:13 p.m. today. May Day protests around the world brought violent demonstrators up against riot police. Well over 1 million people to the streets of France, and a car bomb explosion next to a Madrid soccer stadium. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse young radicals in the Swiss city of Zurich. Good evening, you're on Brainstorms.
Hey, how'd you make out with the presidency there? Did you win?
Oh, no, they ripped off that one. We're on appeal.
Oh, wow, man.
I mean, those folks are the craziest folks. You're talking about, let's tell everybody what you're talking about. We're talking about GSU, of course. And those folks are the most corrupt, crazy folks I've ever seen. First of all, they run an election where their own Senate has passed a new constitution. And instead of submitting that as it should have been submitted, they left it out. So that they're running an election, and the newly elected body, SGA body, is going to be free to do anything they damn well please, like hell. It's one of the points of the appeal. Secondly, they very conveniently, first time around, failed to publish the statements of two of the candidates. The candidate that won, of course, got double exposure at the expense of the Student Government Association. I could go on.
Is there a place where you could go to get some information about the results?
Yeah, do you have a computer?
Yeah, huh?
Go to rampway.org.
Okay.
Or on the other hand, go to the second place. It's gsusignal.com.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much, sir.
And thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Let me go on with this recitation of what's going on in the world. And this is Reuters, as I say, filed 2:13 p.m. Eastern Time in Paris. In Spain, the Basque separatist group ETA claimed responsibility for a car bomb which exploded near a Madrid soccer stadium hours before a European Champions League semi-final match. Madrid police said 9 people were slightly injured in the blast, which destroyed several cars. Let me interject here, guys. My voice isn't with it today, as you no doubt can tell. And one of the reasons is that this city has become one of the most polluted cities in the entire country. It's 6th or 7th on the list. I got the asthma that's causing this problem many, many years ago living in LA, which is still number 1 in pollution. But here I sit. I've been in the hospital last week. I've been back to the hospital this week for additional medication and treatment. And because we breathe pure garbage, which can be cured, it can be cleaned up really easily. I'm sitting here and I have problems with my voice, so you'll forgive me. But let me go on. And you might take that, by the way, as a comment on the nature of capitalist society. Madrid police said 9 people were slightly injured in the blast, which destroyed several cars. Shortly after the bombing, there was a second, smaller explosion on the other side of the city in what authorities said was likely to have been the attackers blowing up a getaway car. In eastern Turkey, security police clashed with some 1,500 protesters and used armored vehicles to break up a May Day protest. Larger demonstrations in the capital, Ankara, and the country's biggest city, Istanbul, passed off peacefully. Now, this is Turkey's no easy place to do this kind of stuff. Turkey is a military regime, not at all an easy place to do that kind of stuff. Workers' rights. Almost every country in the world marks May Day in one way or another, and this is their recitation as in part. But let me go on and read it. Almost every country in the world marks May Day in one way or another, and the date is officially recognized by the United Nations as International Labor Day. I didn't know that. So the United Nations has actually gotten on board, trying to incorporate it for its own purposes, no doubt. Droves of anti-globalization and anti-pollution protesters clogged the streets of London with carnival-style protests, including a picnic and a cycle ride under the watchful eyes of police forewarned of possible anarchist attacks. Oh yes, it's always the anarchists that are going to attack, and everybody's got to watch out for that, and so they sit on everybody's ass. In other cities, trade unionists marched in more traditional May Day parades calling for better workers' rights. A sea of red flags and banners, you know, that hated red flag that everybody gets very upset about. A sea of red flags and banners transformed a medieval piazza in Bologna, northern Italy, as some 75,000 labor union members, many clutching red carnations, attended a Labor Day rally with a slogan: for peace, employment, the defense of rights, and against terrorism. Greek protesters used May Day marches to denounce Israel's incursion into the West Bank, burning an effigy of Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, that is Butcher Sharon, outside the U.S. Embassy in Athens. A huge workers' rally in the Syrian capital, Damascus, quickly turned into a show of solidarity with the Palestinians. "Sharon, you dog," some protesters shouted. Papal message. Let's see what the Pope had to say. In warm Italian sunshine, some 18,000 people gathered in front of the Basilica of St. Peter's in the Vatican to listen to Pope John Paul deliver his May Day audience. Deliver his May Day audience. I guess I mean message to his audience, to the audience. Good evening. You're on Brainstorms.
Yeah, you're skipping around way too much. Can you please slow down and start over and help us follow you better, because you're skipping around, jumping all around.
Haven't been jumping around, but if I'm running too fast, I'll slow down.
Thank you very much, tough guy.
Thank you. And I find it interesting that the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church have to get on board with May Day. There's lots of talk here about how communism is dead. Nobody believes in that stuff anymore. But all over the world, as you can see, the matter is somewhat different. So much different that even the Pope has to get on board. Let's see what the Pope has to say about May Day. Today is Labor Day. Through work, man becomes more human. Well, I disagree with the Pope. It is through work that man is human. Man does create his own existence, and that's straight Marxist. But for hard work to allow man to become more human, it must always exist within a social framework, he said. I would disagree with the Pope again in that the social framework is as natural to man as is the hard work. We create our existence in social society working together. Pro-Kremlin parties and trade unions stole, and that's all they have quoted anyway. Pro-Kremlin parties and trade unions stole the show from communists in Moscow by staging an estimated 140,000 strong rally in the Red Square, something the country has not seen since the Soviet days. Oh, how very interesting. Communism is dead. Capitalism has been restored in the Soviet Union, so they would have you believe, but suddenly there's a rally so large in Red Square that it's something the country has not seen since the Soviet days. How very interesting. In the Philippines, 25,000 leftist workers and followers of disgraced former Philippine President Joseph Estrada marched on the heavily guarded presidential palace, demanding the ouster of his successor, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Malaysian authorities arrested 17 people in the capital, Kuala Lumpur, after labor activists marched through the city center with banners calling for the better rights for plantation workers. In Australia, where police arrested dozens of people after scuffles broke out of the picket to protest against the country's immigration policies, union leaders expressed concern their peaceful cause was being hijacked by fringe groups. Well, very conservative union leaders often say things like that. They fear their own membership and what their own membership might do. Communist authorities in China, which once derided private enterprise as evil capitalism, showed just how such things had changed by canonizing entrepreneurs as model workers. Oh boy, are you an entrepreneur, guys? Any of you out there trying to make out by ripping off your fellow man for his excess labor? Well, the Maoist regime in China has just declared that entrepreneurs are model workers and they awarded special medals to successful businessmen. Well, I think that's a nice roundup, and it shows that if communism is dead, most of the world isn't aware of it. You ought to think about it. Let's go to the main article on France. And the number here, as you can see on the screen, is 873-1349. What do you guys got to say on May Day? What do you guys got to say about this old commie sitting out here saying communism isn't dead? The evidence is all over the world, no matter what so many people may think or wish to think in this country. What do you guys got to say about this? This is important stuff. We're looking at a revolution going on, and I know that you're used to thinking of revolution as a major sudden upheaval in one place or another with a sudden culmination. But actually, it's a long process. It has its ebbs and flows, and it's got its very explosive moments, and very rarely in history, but it happens. That's what the Russian Revolution was about. Very rarely in history, but it happens, and it will happen again. The people of a country take total control and impose their will and do away with private property and production, do away with private banks, so on and so forth. And that's what's necessary from what we're hearing in Argentina. But let me read to you again. Well, this isn't Reuters. This is the Associated Press. It's dated today at 2:37 p.m. Eastern Time. Paris. Well over 1 million people across France marched against extreme right-wing leader Jean-Marie Le Pen on Wednesday, just 4 days before he faces President Jacques Chirac in a race that has mobilized the country. That's an interesting conjuncture. We have the extreme right-wing leader, the fascist Le Pen, facing for the presidency a right-wing bourgeois Chirac. The marches on the traditional labor holiday of May Day were the culmination of nearly 2 weeks of public protests following Le Pen's stunning showing in the presidential election's first round. The largest march was in eastern Paris, centered around the Place de la Bastille, site of the Revolutionary-era prison that is a symbol of French democracy. That is to say, symbol of the French Revolution against the monarchy. It's a symbol of the Paris Commune. At least 400,000 people of all ages and classes of society chanted anti-Le Pen slogans, held up banners, played instruments or beat drums to reggae beats. Elsewhere in France, more than 900,000 others marched in a dozen cities, including Grenoble, Lyon, Bordeaux, Marseille, Toulouse, and Strasbourg. That's very interesting. They have a total of over 1 million people, but they have 900,000 people in a dozen cities and 400,000 at least in Paris. That looks like 1.3 million at least. Le Pen is a danger to liberty. We just have to block him, said Francois Taquet, 48 of Saint-Quentin near Paris. You'll pardon my French, it stinks. I don't have any. Didier Hughes, 56, an economist, called Le Pen, quote, a fascist, and so dangerous for France that we must all unite, unquote. I've not seen this kind of atmosphere on the streets for 30 years, he added. And that ought to be a measure of how very hot things are beginning to get. That now, in regard to this election, huge masses are on the streets of Paris, a country that is not, that has known in the past a major revolution and could be very close to making a new one. The anti-Le Pen rallies came after the far-right leader held a much smaller demonstration in Paris to honor his party's heroine, Joan of Arc. In an annual May Day event that took on added importance this year because of Le Pen's surprise showing, he placed a bouquet of white flowers at a gilded statue of Joan of Arc riding a horse and waving the national flag. For Le Pen's National Front Party, the 15th century peasant girl who led a series of victories against the English is a symbol of French resistance against foreign, quote, invaders, unquote. In a speech, Le Pen promised an electoral earthquake in the election's final round, which Chirac is expected to win easily. The ground's going to crumble under their feet, he said. And I ought to tell you, Le Pen, in the absence of a socialist leadership prepared and organized to take power in behalf of the working class or with the working class, is a very dangerous figure. He's every bit as dangerous as Hitler ever was. Police and observers estimated the pro-Le Pen crowd at 10,000 to 12,000 people, though Le Pen's party claimed there were as many as 100,000 marchers. Wednesday, a sunny day in Paris and a national holiday, was the climax of snowballing protests against Le Pen. Last week, in the previous highest turnout, about 350,000 people protested against the nation. So these protests have been ongoing, and they are getting bigger. And as we shall see, there will be some pitched battles out there. Who wins and to what end is still open. Some 3,500 police, from riot police to plainclothes officers, were deployed in Paris alone. At the Bastille, good-natured crowd shouting, "Down with Le Pen," packed the square and surrounding side streets. A few people handed out sing-along lyrics mocking the far-right leader. Well, it's good-natured at the moment. We'll see if the police do something to change that. Thousands carried signs calling Le Pen and his National Front Party Nazis. Many signs were emblazoned with the swastika, and some showed Le Pen with a narrow mustache drawn in to resemble Adolf Hitler. Well, the French ought to know, shouldn't they? Since they were occupied by Hitler's troops. Down with the National Front. Le Pen was as in, N as in Nazi, F as in fascist, protesters shouted. Some held up posters of Martin Luther King with the caption, "Don't break his dream." One demonstrator, 20-year-old Abdul Fofana, said, "If Le Pen wins, there will be a world war in France." And that, of course, means there will be a civil war, and the immigration population will be heavily involved. Fofana, who came to France from the Ivory Coast 10 years ago, was worried about Le Pen's fiercely anti-immigrant stance. Some of the protesters were combined with traditional May Day labor protests by unions. In Paris, 1,000 marchers from a labor union headed toward the center of town protesting Le Pen, capitalism, and fascism. A few May Day protests elsewhere in Europe made reference to Le Pen. Dieter Scholz, a German labor union official, drew applause at a rally of about 10,000 people in front of Berlin City Hall, where he said, "Whoever preaches hate and xenophobia has no place in this city, in Germany, or in Europe. That is why we declare solidarity with French unions in the campaign against Le Pen." At the pro-Le Pen demonstration in Paris, Maurice Domontat, a 58-year-old retired police brigadier, admitted that Le Pen is the unloved candidate. Well, I guess a cop who was no doubt all his life unloved would understand that his candidate is unloved as well. But he's our only chance to put things in order, to stop all the crime and have people respect our laws, he said. A few people showed their anger at Le Pen's parade. One family standing on a balcony above the marchers hung out a banner that read simply, "No." On a bridge over the Seine, about 1,000 people honored the memory of a Moroccan man who was drowned by National Front supporters during a rally on May 1, 1995. A group of skinheads at the rally pushed the man, Brahim Buram off the bridge. And that's not new. Same thing has happened in other countries, including Britain, where fascists, these young gangs of fascist youth, have murdered and attacked people who are immigrants as well as others. Le Pen has been convicted of racism or anti-Semitism 5 times. He blames immigration, particularly from Muslim North Africa, for unemployment, which has edged up in March to 9.1%, and for rising crime. That's an interesting thing to blame immigration for this. I wonder if you could do that here in the United States or in other places. Of course, unemployment is a factor when the employer, that is the owner of the means of production, discovers that the product he produces can't be sold on the market, and as a result closes down. And that's classical. That's what's going on. That's what is happening all over the world. That is, that producers of commodities, the owners of the means of producing commodities, the owners of the factories, are discovering they cannot sell their commodity, they cannot sell their product. And you know damn well they're not going to pay workers to stay in their factories producing things they can't sell. They kick them out and close them down. And that's what's going on. And Le Pen, seeking to benefit from that situation, instead blames it on immigrant workers. Hardly the case. The classical picture of capitalism is that it always produces far more than it can sell on the market, and sooner or later it closes down. His success, let me read that again, the entire paragraph. Le Pen has been convicted of racism or anti-Semitism 5 times. He blames immigration, particularly from Muslim North Africa, for unemployment, which edged up in March to 9.1%. That's pretty hefty, guys. And for rising crime. His success in the April 21 first round of elections stunned France and most of its allies and neighbors. The far-right leader wants to pull France out of the European Union and return to the franc, the currency abandoned in favor of the euro at the start of this year, as well as deport all illegal immigrants and tighten border controls. And you know, this last about Le Pen and what Le Pen wants to do is interesting, because the European Union, that is an economic union of all of the countries, or most of the countries, the principal countries of Europe, is actually an attempt by those countries to band together to compete with, guess who? The country you live in. This country, the United States, to compete economically on the world market. And it has nothing to do with anything but that. And Le Pen wants to put an end to that and become a nationalist, a French nationalist, and isolate the French economy in that way. But in order to compete, they have to band together. They have to work together. And it won't solve the problem, of course, because right now more is being produced than can be sold on the market. Not more than is needed, but more than can be sold on the market. He wants to deport all illegal immigrants, and that's just another one of the old games that are played by right-wing ideologues in trying to build behind them some sort of support for their program. He cannot solve the problems of fascism, but fascism becomes the tool of the ruling class to suppress a working class faced with starvation. Good evening, you're on Brainstorms.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Jack.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, how are you?
I'm marvelous. I want to call, let me get off the service for a moment. I just want to talk about the problems in the Middle East, as to maybe they tied into what you're talking about now.
Yeah, they are, and I read an editorial early on that mentioned them, yes.
Okay, I missed it. But what I wanted to call, I be watching the media. I watch Fox News and other media, and it appears to me that the media, their point is just to make the
let me stop you for a second.
Homicidal, suicidal maniacs.
Let me stop you for a second and make a suggestion. You have a computer at home?
Yes, I do.
It's not as easy as facile as watching television.
Right.
Television is very superficial. If you go up on the computer on web, you will find lots of material, even if it's just the usual bourgeois press, Reuters, so on and so forth. Reuters agency, France Presse, or stuff like that. It's much denser. You get a lot more material. But go ahead.
But we're not calling. I want your opinion personally. I want to know, I was listening to Ali Keys the other night, a black man that was giving his stand on the relationship between the Palestinians and Israel. But as what I see, it appears to me that we as black people should be more sympathetic to the move of the Palestinians. Because when I was thinking about Geronimo, Jack, when Geronimo wanted to maintain their land and the Europeans was continuing trying to run them off. But it appears to me that they're making the people that is occupied to be the enemy to the people that doing occupying. So what my question to you is, what sense do that make? Now I know from a people that originally were the inhabitants of the land. Either one of those people are not the original inhabitants of Israel.
Now,
Due to the fact that it is as it is, and it's been like this for the last 50 years since 1948. Why could America and all the major networks wants to make the Palestinian people appear to be the enemy, and it appear to me they're being victimized? Your comments, please.
Let me read to you from the beginning of the editorial I read before, from the daily newspaper of the Workers' Revolutionary Party in Britain, that is the Newsline. And the heading of the editorial is Workers Organized for World Revolution. And it's our May Day editorial statement. On May Day 2002, the Newsline editorial board sends its revolutionary greetings to the workers and poor of the world, who in every country and in every continent are resisting fiercely the attempts of imperialism to reorder the world. We send our greetings in particular to the heroic Palestinian people and their steadfast leadership around President Yasser Arafat. They are on the front line of the struggle against the U.S. and United Kingdom, supported Israel and its military machine, the most powerful in the Middle East. We send our greetings to the Palestinian youth and workers who in Jenin, Nablus, Ramallah, Hebron, and Bethlehem have given a glorious example of how to fight against imperialism and its Zionist gangsters.
Jack, I know your opinion would be very favorable. And Jack, I want to ask you, are you Jewish?
I'm a human being like you.
I know. I'm not trying to get into religion.
I know. I'm an African like you.
Okay, I know you're the original people. I know you're part of that, but...
We all are.
I agree, but the minds of people have been influenced by those that control the means of production and those that control the means of media and those that control the wealth, to the point that as long as they can benefit from that wealth, they don't care what those producers of controlling those goods and services do. I mean, people would just selling their soul.
They use.
I'm gonna say this, Jack. I have a problem with the Atlanta Board of Education.
They use religion, nationality, all kinds of things to set us against each other.
I agree.
Which is why I give you the kind of answer I give you. But to be straight, my family were nominally Jews.
That's what I thought. That's all.
But they never practiced.
Okay.
And they used to beat me to get me to go to Hebrew school.
Okay. But we not asked, Jack. I know I've seen you. You always remind me of somebody that want to be balanced. If it's truth, I stand on it. You might have we have some difficulty with the original reality of man origin. But I do give you credit for trying to put things on a balanced measure. And being a Muslim and teaching Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that's all we say. We ain't back color line, as long as if your mind is just. See, the scripture say renew your mind. And I give you credit, because you have always shown me that you would put things from on a scale and weigh it based on that scale.
Based on what's good for those of us who create the world.
But you still want to worry about the proletariat.
Well, aren't they the people that create the world?
Yeah, they're the people that create the world, but you know what I'm saying? The reason they got in the predicament that, let me say it like this, slavery would have existed in America if all the white people didn't decide to want to go along with it. Or if they didn't go along with it, they didn't choose to speak out against it.
Well, it's not that simple, unfortunately.
They benefited from it, Jack.
It's not that simple, and yes, white folks did indeed benefit from it, but they've also been victims of it.
Well, we know that.
Because as long as there was slavery, then it was easier to keep white people working for less money. And as long as there's racism, then it's possible to keep white people for working for less money. It's possible to keep them from organizing trade unions to fight for better conditions for all of us.
Well, we're not saying, I look at Africa today. Africa is suffering tremendously. Not due to just the peoples in Africa, it's just our own people. We are the most rented peoples in America than you can find anywhere else.
Let me make a suggestion.
Right.
And you're going to disagree vehemently with me, but let me make a suggestion. You constantly refer, and we're talking about color, You constantly refer to our own people. But your own people, if I may put it in those terms, that is, those people who are black. Just look at Atlanta. Is Herman Russell one of your people?
Oh, surely by the skin on his bones, but that don't make his heart be in accord with the mind that the God.
Well, that's my point. The question is not ultimately, I understand about the social construct. I understand why black folks who have been tormented by this question of color, by racism, refer to other people of color as their people. I understand all that. But in order to deal with the problem, we have to get beyond that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I ain't got no problem with that, but as it is, I do have to, like you just brought that point up about Herman Russell, I still respect him as an individual, but yet it's still, the bottom line would be, if we both was in a place where there was overt racism, I don't think Herman Russell would be the first to say, I'm not one of them.
Let me ask you a dumb question. Do you know how Herman Russell makes his money?
Yes.
How?
He made it through exploiting the people that work for him as
Right.
he work in the capitalist environment.
Right. He pays them enough to come back and do it again tomorrow, a day's wage, right?
Right.
But they produce in a day's work, which is what they're supposed to produce in exchange for that starvation day's wage. They produce many, many times the value of what he pays them. So he exploits them.
But people got to begin to stand up, Jack. People got to begin to take their own means and make a difference.
I understand, but how can you say that you can respect the man?
Now, I can respect him because I say that because I'm a black man. And I know by my heart being a black man that the richness, see, Jack, this will mean you fall short. Let me put it like this. See, I know the Honorable Elijah Herman teaching is very clear to me. And I really believe the essence of it is very clear. The mind of the black man has always been greater than the mind of those that put us in this bondage. But we have not used it.
Brother, we're talking about a man.
I'm talking about balance. I'm just talking about balance.
I understand, but brother, we're talking about a man, Herman Russell, who uses his mind every day of the week to rip off folks like you and me, regardless of color, and to make himself rich at our expense.
Yes.
How can you respect that kind of man? How can you even look at the question of color when the question at base is economics?
Okay, yes, you know religion. I'm going to tell you why. Because even in the Quran, even in the scriptures, it makes it very clear. To whom much is given, much is required. I could see Herman Russell on the street. I could tell him what we just said. That don't mean that he would take a gun and blow my brains out.
Herman Russell will sneer at you and walk away.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't care that, but he won't blow my brains out.
But my point is, Herman Russell is not one of us.
Well,
Herman Russell is not us at all. Russell is one of the exploiters.
Yes.
And that's why, with all due respect for the way people of color have been treated, and understanding why you focus on color, why folks focus on color, understanding all of that, why in the end one has to step beyond that and see the economic relationships that drive that business and put those economic relationships at an end.
I'm not going to waste time trying to convert him. But the reality is, at some point, those 10% of one who controls the wealth of the earth will submit to the order of
He's one of them.
I agree he's one, but he's not the one that
He is one of them.
manifests.
He is one of them. He is a multi-millionaire.
Yes, but he's still, he like he crabs in the barrel among the 10%.
Well,
At the top, but not at the main top.
but he ain't yours or mine, I can tell you that, regardless of
All right,
color.
Zach, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, my friend.
Here come.
And here we go. We're on our way out. We'll be here. We won't be here next week unless something changes. We're going to raise bloody hell to make sure, or to try and be here next week. But you call in and tell Allison Fussell she's being a gangster, and she's got to put an end to this and put us back on. Talk to you. Thank you. Bye.